Hello everyone, my name is Stephanie Phillips. I'm the founder of World Childless Week, and we're here today with two ladies who are going to do, I think, which could be quite a fun webinar, because we're talking about the comments that hurt and how we react to them and what we say. And I'm not going to put the word in or say the word that they put in their comments, although sometimes I'm very tempted. So without further ado, I'm just going to say good morning, Karin, and good morning, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming along to do this webinar.
Hi, Steph.
You.
Hi,
hello.
Steph.
So
good
I am
morning.
now going to literally turn off my audio, turn off my video, and leave it over to you.
Fab. Thank you, Steph, and thank you so much for that lovely warm introduction. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world dialing in from. It's really lovely to have you here on this webinar on how to deal with comments that hurt when you just want to say F off. I'm Karin Enfield. With me, I have the lovely Sarah Roberts, and we will introduce ourselves in just a minute. But before we do, Sarah, could you please click on to the next slide? And so I just wanted to go through some housekeeping for this call. And Sarah, just a quick question for you. Maybe you could use the arrow on your keyboard rather than your mouse to scroll through the slides, because then we don't see the
Perfect.
Annotation box coming up. That'd be great. Thanks. So ladies and gentlemen who are in the call, I don't know if there's any men actually who've dialed in this morning, but if you have, or if you're watching this on the recording afterwards, also a warm welcome to all of you. There's some housekeeping for this call. I just want to make sure that everybody can hear us and that you can see us. And if you could just type yes or no in the chat, that would be great. There is Michael. Great. Good to see you, Michael. And I just wanted to see, the chat is confirming yes, that you can both hear and see me and Sarah. That is brilliant. And well, yeah, I actually don't need to explain anymore how to participate, because you've all I think we've all become Zoom experts over the last 6 months. You know, please type in any questions that you may have, not in the chat box, but please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, because Steph will be moderating the call for us today. So she will keep an eye on the questions that come in, and we will answer the questions towards the end of the call. If your question is technical related, then please do drop your any technical questions that you might have in the chat, and direct them at Steph, please, so that we don't confuse them with any questions you might have on the content. And of course, we have a raise your hand function as well on the Zoom. So that's how you can participate with us today. Thank you so much, Sarah. Next slide, please. So the introductions. So today I have with me the lovely Sarah Roberts, who is based in Australia, and Sarah is a grief counsellor. She has over 30 years of experience in counselling, teaching, and community work, and she is also the founder of the Empty Cradle, which is her organization and her network to support women who are childless not by choice, and also she supports women who go through infertility grief. And as it says here, Sarah is passionate about the complexity of the human experience and what it means to live a good life. A very, very warm good afternoon to you, Sarah. I'm so happy to have you here with us.
Hi, Karin. It's so nice to be here. Happy World Childless Week to everyone.
Thank you, darling. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Karin Enfield. I am the operations director of Gateway Women, for which I facilitate online mentorship programs, reignite weekends, and I also head up the Benelux branch, and Benelux stands for Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, which is a kind of like a small region in Europe. I'm from Holland. I live in Belgium. I'm married to an Englishman, and I am heading up the Benelux organization for Gateway Women as well. And yeah, I'm also very passionate about the topic that we're talking about today. I'm actually, some people call a potty mouth or a foul mouth. So I use the F word quite a lot when people actually make comments that hurt me. So this is right up my street, and I'm just really happy to have you all here with us.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah, for clicking on to the next slide.
Righty. Oh, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Karin. And I have been known to be a little potty mouth as well. And I wonder if it's our national language down under here, but I'm not quite sure that that's the case. I just wanted to say a really special welcome to all of the people from Australia and New Zealand in our local community, and to thank you for being here. I wanted to start with what's really important when we do gathering on within Australia. It's really important for us to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country. And one of the reasons this is really important to me is not just out of respect for the custodians of the land, but also because for me, when I was going through the really, really dark places of my grieving journey and the decade when I was trying to conceive and have children, the land that we live on, so I do a lot of native gardening, and it was really important in terms of my grieving and healing space for me to be out on that land. So I have such a strong sense of appreciation and gratitude for the custodians who looked after the land here. So I'm just going to do the formal acknowledgement of the Yagara and Turrbal people, the traditional owners of the Brisbane region, and their custodianship of the lands from which we gather. We pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognise their valuable contribution to the Australian and global society. The next thing I want to do, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And sorry to yeah, that's really powerful. And I just, thank you for acknowledging that. And I just wanted to acknowledge, and one more thing as well, to our guests today who are live here with us. This call is being recorded. However, you nor your name nor the chat is visible on the recording. So anything you share with us in the chat or in the Q&A will be completely anonymous. We will not call out your names. Again, like I said, your names will not be visible on the call. So none of what you share here is directly linked back to you as an individual. It's just me, Sarah, and Steph who are visible on the recording as well as the materials. So I just wanted to share that as well. And then Sarah, again, thank you so much for the beautiful acknowledgement of the traditional owners from Brisbane, Australia. And I know how much that means to you. So I'm really glad you brought that in. So thank you. Back to you.
Thank you. It brings my emotions quite close to the surface. So so it feels really, really powerful to say that. So we also wanted to thank our childless elders, to thank Steph and the World Childlessness team for creating this space for us. Thank you to you and to the pioneers who've paved the way for our voices to be heard. We are part of your legacy.
Wow.
And then finally, I wanted to say thank you to you, the participants, and thank you so much to the women who completed the survey. It was really, really powerful reading through your responses, and just thank you for sharing your precious story with us, and to know that together we are stronger, that this is about us breaking the chains of shame and coming together and becoming a really powerful force for change in our culture. So thank you.
Oh, wow. So that's just looking at the number of participants, looking at the chat, it's just very powerful stuff here. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Excellent. So just a minute. Just wanted to wish everybody a happy World Childlessness Week, and we'd love to hear where you're dialing in from, so where you're listening from. So if you'd like to tell us in the chat, that would be amazing. And Steph can let us know some of the different places that we're gathering from.
Hi, we've gone global. We're in the UK, we're in the US, New Zealand, Australia, Denmark. I think Italy was here somewhere. So it's definitely a mixed bundle, which is really lovely because it shows how truly global World Childless Week is becoming. The fact that we're getting the message out there to all these different countries. So
exciting.
Yeah, Germany there as well. Everywhere.
So exciting.
It really is very exciting, and thank you. Also, I just quickly saw someone actually writing that it's 5 a.m. in Florida, and the person has dialed in just for this at 5 a.m. So, oh my goodness, good morning. I hope you have a strong cup of coffee. Yeah, warm welcome, and I hope you have a strong cup of coffee. I've got my mid-morning tea, but so yeah, lovely. And to everybody who's dialing in your evening time, I hope you have a good glass of wine here with you, because that's what I would be doing if it was my evening time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Righty. So just a quick little session overview. So just to give you a little bit of these are the broad brushstrokes we're going to touch on tonight. The first is that we're going to go through a little bit about comments that hurt, a little bit about what the types of comments are, to get a bit of a feel for why are we getting these comments? First of all, why do they hurt so much? But why do we consistently get these appallingly bad responses to our experiences of childlessness? And it's not just one or two. It was almost universal, where all of us are experiencing these appallingly bad responses. And so we wanted to unpack that a little bit, and just to talk about kind of a little bit of understanding of it, then to develop a little bit of a framework to say, how can we empower ourselves to respond individually in those moments when the responses are happening, and then to talk a little bit about, you know, that we also have how can we work collectively for cultural change, and that us as individuals aren't responsible for changing the whole lot, but basically how can we empower ourselves a little bit more effectively to navigate our social world. Then we're going to do a little bit of skills practice, and we're really hoping to leave a good chunk of time at the end to do a bit of question and answer session. So we wanted to start with a grounding meditation. So what I wanted you to do is, if you're feeling comfortable, and I wanted to acknowledge that this came from one of my childless mentors, a woman called Nicole, who works in northern New South Wales. And she really supported me really through a good 10 years of my journey. So I want you to sit comfortably with your feet on the floor. If you've got your legs crossed, then just to put your feet flat on the floor. To open your palms and hands and to put them crossed across your heart at your chest. To hold your chest, and then to close your eyes. And then I want you to take 3 deep breaths down into your belly. So this meditation is about really grounding you and inviting you to be here in the space together. So I want you to imagine a white light from your heart going up into the sky, and then bringing that white light back down through the top of your head and back into your heart. Then imagine a stream of red light flowing from the center of your chest, down through your body, down through your legs, down into the earth, down into the center of the earth, and feeling the weight of what you've been carrying, just feeling your body relax a little bit as you're held in the earth. And then imagine that light coming back up through your body, up through your feet, through your body, back to your heart. And I want you to imagine the pink and the white and the red light mixing in your heart. And then coming up through your shoulders, back down your arms, through your hand, and then back into your heart. A beautiful, loving light where you're feeding your heart the love and the nurture and the care that you need. I want you to feel into your body, notice any sensations, any tightness or tingling. And I want you to say to yourself, I'm here with you. We've got this. Taking a deep breath in and just saying, of course, no wonder you're feeling like this. This is really hard. And I want you to feel your heart soften and feel yourself embracing yourself with care and with love. And for you to feel yourself coming into this space together as we share this love with each other, as we meet across the globe. And once you feel safe, for you to drop your hands to your lap and to send this loving, compassionate light to all your childless sisters and brothers. We share your story, we share your pain, and we hold a space for each other as we come back into our lives. As we speak our truth, we hold a space for each other with love. I want you to gently take 3 more deep, invigorating breaths. And when you're ready, to open your eyes and come back into the room. How was that for you, Karin? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. And it feels very empowering and very grounding. And I actually felt part of this this whole global connection with everybody who is in the call here with us. I kind of felt that white light traveling around the globe at supersonic speed and just touch everybody. And that's also why I love that we did the check-in to kind of check where everybody's dialing in from, because I just
that was lovely, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I just traveled in my mind. I just traveled to all those places with that white light in my heart, and just acknowledging everybody here. So thank you very much.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. And I know for me how critically important it was to connect with other women and other men as well who were going through my journey. And it was just such a, oh my God, it's not just me. It was so powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's keep moving then. So what we wanted to talk to you a little bit about in terms of this workshop is that this workshop is going to touch on some really painful points for us. And essentially it's really important that we look at that you get really good care during this workshop and also afterwards. We just wanted to say that the response to our childlessness is like the frontier between our personal painful grief journeys and the pronatalist external world. The comments that we receive are like the abusive words thrown at other minority groups. They're dehumanizing, they shame, marginalize, and silence us who have deviated from the pronatalist norm. And this has to stop. So we just wanted to say that this workshop may touch on some sore spots and bring up some emotions that you might prefer. So you might prefer to be in a quiet and private place. And we just wanted to make sure that you look after yourself during the workshop and consider what support you might need afterwards. So Karin, when we received all the survey responses, I know that when I read through the responses, and there was a lot of them, there were, a good 30 responses that were amazing. And I remember reading through them and I actually stopped reading and I cried. It really hit me just how painful and sad and hard it is for us to be in the world. And particularly that the world is not necessarily a place that we can rely on, that it's going to be emotionally safe for us to walk through the world as childless women. And I just wondered, how was it for you? How did those comments land for you when you read them?
Oh, Sarah, I when you shared the survey results with me, in just that one document, I think after reading the second page, because it's a 12-page document, and after reading the second page, I just had to stop reading because I was so overcome with just this incredible sadness and just this and rage and anger and so many emotions that came up, and especially around the shame and the blame that we as childless persons seem to carry with us, and also some of us are childless not by choice, but I prefer actually to use childless childless by circumstance, and it just felt so unfair, to be honest with you, and it really struck an incredible chord with me, and it actually reminded me, it took me back to an exercise I did about 3-4 years ago around kind of like the bingos, words that hurt, kind of bingo. And so what you see on the screen here, to everybody who's watching the screen, these are actually, this is my handwriting, well, my scribbles, I should say, and these are some of the comments that I got when I was, well, I still get, but when I was, that really, really hurt me when I was still in the depths of my grief. I'm pretty advanced now in my grief journey, I must say. However, these were some of the comments that I was that I got thrown to me when I was, when I was asked questions, and some of it like, oh, can't your sister have a baby for you? It's just like, what? You know,
Yeah.
You
Like
don't
it's
even
that
know
easy.
as if it's that
Yeah.
easy, or oh, why don't the good old one, why don't you just adopt?
Yeah.
Really, really, and that is one of the comments I still get, and that really for a while, when I was in my really angry phase in my grief, it has a purpose, trust me. If you're feeling angry at this moment in time, it's okay to feel angry, it has a purpose. But when I was in my angry, raging bitch face, as I call it, and I'm sorry for swearing, as I told you at the beginning, I have a potty mouth, I do bring in those words at times, but when I was my angry bitch phase, I was almost ready to kind of, I now understand why people have like, get like a killer instinct almost. I haven't killed anyone, don't worry, but I can imagine that you just want to strangle somebody. It's just like, how dare you? How dare you just kind of dismiss my emotion, but also how dare you to just come up with a solution as if I have not thought of every single other possibility that there might be in the world to fulfill my wish to become a mother, even though I couldn't. I'm childless because of cervical cancer. I had my womb was removed when I was 33. I was left with a body in bits. And, of course, I've thought of adoption. I've thought of every other option there is available to mankind, even options that might not even be feasibly possible, but and then just like so again, when I was in that angry phase, I just went, oh yeah, sure, I hear China's nice, China's easy, or oh, I'll just drive to Timbuktu and just pick up a baby from the side of the road there, right? So it's just,
or aisle 7 in Sainsbury's, isn't there? That's the baby aisle, isn't it?
It's the baby aisle, exactly. And so that was the big one. And of course, well, at least you have each other and the cats. Yeah, we have cats. So yeah, automatically in there is a kind of stigmatization of oh, you the crazy cat lady. Oh, well, at least you have your cats, or well, and also because, like I said, I'm childless after cancer, and someone actually also said, oh, well, at least you're still here. I'm like, yeah, I know I'm still here. I'm living this hell every day. Of course I'm still here. And yes, I'm grateful for still being here. Don't get me wrong. I'm grateful for still being here on this planet and that we have my health back again. Of course I'm grateful for that. However, my entire future, the entire idea of the future that I wanted, has been taken away from me. And also for people who have failed IVF treatments, people who aren't childless because of my circumstances, but for whatever reason you're childless as a person, it should not matter what that reason is. My story is not worse than yours. All our stories
Absolutely
are
not.
valid stories of how we have become people who are childless, not by choice / by circumstance. And
it's
every
completely
comment
individual
that we have, no matter how we got to our story, every comment hurts.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that really took me, that consistently still takes me by surprise, is I'm staggered by the invisibility of that we go through this journey where I know for me, the one fixed point in my life when I was a young woman was motherhood and having a family and motherhood. And yes, there was lots of other stuff going on, but it was always, I guess, it was always part of my future. And to lose that was a staggering loss for me. It was really significant on lots and lots of different levels. And I think the thing that surprised me the most was just how invisible it was to people and how unwilling people were to go there in terms of being willing to empathize, to put themselves in our shoes and have a feel for what life was like from our perspective. Like the lack of curiosity, the lack of, almost in a way, the lack of care. Certainly one of the things that I've noticed is that people treat childlessness as if it's a fact. Oh, you can't have children. Whereas childlessness is actually an ongoing lived experience. And that's a really important thing for us to keep in mind, is that this is actually something that we live through and we journey through. It's not just oh, we couldn't have children and that was the end of it. Now we just seem to have lost Karin for a moment, so I'm just going to keep moving on. And
yeah,
I'm sure
she's lost her signal. I think she's gone for a charger. She'll be back.
Okay, thank you. So what we wanted to then have a look at is to have a quick look at the categories and the different types of comments. So in terms of the comments that you spoke to us about, what we did is we went through them and we put them all into different categories, and these were the different categories we were able to come up with. So some of them, bless, were lovely, sensitive, supporting and caring comments. And the thing that was really lovely is that for most of you, when we asked about comments from other childless women, for most women, they said no, other childless women have been really supportive, and that hasn't been so much an issue for them. We have at other times had women who said things like, oh, well, they were supportive around my childlessness, but they tried to problem solve me being single. And all I wanted to do was just sit with how hard that was. So I guess what we wanted to say is that a lot of those supportive comments came from both childless women in particular, or other childless people, but also people who are parenting and other people out in the community. So when we had a look at then the other types of comments, the first one was looking at pronatalist assumptions. So that was things like where it was assumed that you had children, and that parenting and having children was the central conversation topic. So it was just people just launch in chatting about, kids, grandkids, all that sort of stuff. Then things like pregnancy, birth, marriage announcements, those sorts of things that could be really quite painful and quite thoughtless in terms of how that would land for people who are childless. The second area was then looking at assumption of choice. So it was assumed that you didn't want to have kids. So it was like, oh, you don't have kids? Oh, that must be by choice. So that must be, that's the end of the conversation. Okay, well, let me tell you about my grandkids. That kind of comment. You're back with us, Karin.
Yeah. Oh my God. I hope you can see I'm redness with shame and embarrassment. I'm so sorry. I completely forgot to plug in the power lead of my laptop.
Oh.
So I'm so sorry.
No, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, but I'm back. So
good.
please go on. I don't want to disrupt this anymore.
Excellent.
Sorry about that.
The next group of comments were around advice giving and problem solving. So that was things like, oh, well, you can always, and fill in the blank. You could adopt. Here's some conception advice. You just need to relax. Oh, I knew somebody at 50 who had a baby. These kind of miracle baby stories. And it would be where people were trying to problem solve and it was out of sync where you were actually at in your journey. So it might be that you were at the point of grieving and saying, look, this is not the time for me to be problem solving this. My time for trying to sort this out is actually done. I'm now up to the grief part of the journey. And then the really painful ones, which was the blaming, the shaming, the hostility. So things like, based on religion, it's a result of, that you're being, that it's a basis on your sin, or that you're selfish, or it's your fault, that you left it too late. Right, just a whole list of reasons why people were willing to blame and actually be quite openly hostile about your childlessness status.
Yeah, and Sarah, sorry to interrupt, but to add to this as well, what I have learned over the last few years working with women, especially for my work that I do for Gateway Women, and maybe you have learned this as well with your work for the Empty Cradle, is that it's not only that we get blaming comments, but also that we actually blame ourselves quite often.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So it's not so much. So it's not just getting those comments, but also actually giving ourselves. So basically, our inner critic, and that little those voices we have inside our heads. Well, and that kind of also can be very judgmental towards ourselves, which also has been something that I have really had to learn to counter with lots of self-care and self-compassion. And
absolutely.
So I just wanted to add that to this one.
Yeah, that shame and also the grieving. And the reason we're grieving is we're grieving this because it really mattered to us. Like it was really important to us to be a parent. So the next then is comments that minimize the grief. So it's the lucky you, or the, well, you can't grieve for something you didn't have, those kinds of comments, which actually sits very much at odds with modern grief theory. Like it's completely against what we now understand about grief. The next is minimizing motherhood and its importance to you. Oh, being a mother's really hard. It's really hard work. Here, have one of mine. Those sorts of comments, which is, it's not that great. It's not that fun.
Yeah.
Idealizing the child-free life. So, oh, you've got all that free time. You get to sleep in. You're so lucky. You get all that time during lockdown to write your book or to do all those courses, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Are these sounding pretty familiar, Karin?
Oh gosh, I get them so often. You're like, oh my, well, at least you get to travel. You can work, you can do your work from anywhere in the world. And trust me, I don't even want to open the can of worms around this whole pandemic, and how much that has impacted everybody basically, but also how that has kind of been oil on the on the fire. Yes. For pronatalism. You're going to be talking about that later, but how woe is me as a parent. I have to work from home and do homeschooling. Have you got any idea? Have you taken any time to consider what it's like to be a childless person during this pandemic, or a childless single person? Or I'm married. My marriage nearly ended over the last 6 months because of because of the pandemic. Because we had no distraction at home. So it was only the two of us. It's like, oh gosh. So no, it's so incredibly easy how people. Or actually, no, for me, scary with how much ease people are making these comments without just even thinking of, if I say this, like, of course, I'm making the most of my life because I have no other choice. I have no other option. But at the same time, I would trade you for like that, so it's just, Yeah,
and we're making the best of it, but you're exactly right. It comes at a price. It's very bittersweet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then the invalidation of our lives as childless people. So it's you can never know love. There's no place for you. There's the pity that how can you have a life of meaning and purpose if you don't have children? So it's those kinds of comments which are super painful.
Yeah,
and then the final.
Sorry, Sarah. I've actually just seen one in the chat as well, where someone says, "If you, I really hate. If you were a mother, you would understand real love. You know what tired is, etc." And that is just
exactly.
Oh, that is
as a mother
so
type comments. Yes.
Oh gosh, yeah. But also not knowing what. Someone has also said to me once, "Well, you don't know how to love properly because you have not experienced the love that a mother has for her child." And I'm like, okay, so I'm incapable of loving now. What is it that you're trying to say here? Because I have a very big nurturing mother heart inside me. I have a lot of love to give. However, I don't project it just on a child. I project it on the whole world basically. So it's just like so almost ignorant.
Yeah, and you get these incredibly ignorant comments, and then you also get the absence of compassion and empathy. So it's like, okay, if what you're saying is what you believe, which is, what you think my life might be like, where's your compassion then for my struggle with it? Why is it? There's just such a dissonance between the two. It just doesn't make any sense. And it also, they're usually very illogical and very ignorant comments. And we're going to talk a little bit about that soon. So the final one, which is really painful for people, is where the topic's avoided, where it's silence. There's no comment about it. It's an untouchable comment. It's just where you continue through and your journey is just completely invisible and unspoken within either family or social context. This can be things like where it's seen as a personal, not a public matter. It's not something that it's appropriate to talk about publicly. And it can certainly be said in terms of just, you're expected to just get on with it. You're expected to be solid, to just, stop making other people feel uncomfortable in terms of talking about your personal grief. And also you can feel really excluded. And the thing that can be really hard about that then can be when in your family or your social context where other critical things can happen, such as There might be deaths, or there might be certain people losing a job, or other critical events can happen in people's lives, and there is a level of empathy and compassion, and it can be so dissonant when our journey was so invisible and there was that lack of support around it.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things I just wanted to mention in terms of these comments. And one of them is that these comments can change over time as you age. So when I was in my 30s, it was more based around things like fertility and when was that going to happen. And certainly once I got to my mid 40s and 50s, those comments started to change. So I've certainly noticed that. The other thing that I've really noticed is that as I've grieved the losses of this, as I've moved through in terms of my journey, that my response to these comments have changed as well.
Yeah,
so
same here.
Has that been your experience, Karin?
Very much so. I think when I was first confronted with such comments, I was just so stunned that I didn't know what to say, and I just kind of, and it's hard to imagine because I'm an incredibly extroverted person. I'm loud. I'm present. I was never shy, and I just turned into a person I did not recognize anymore. I was so hiding under this kind of almost like this kind of blanket of shame, this kind of cloak of shame that I carried around with me for not fitting in anymore, for being, for completely lost connection with myself for such a long time. And I didn't realize that I was grieving at that moment in time yet. So everything that was said to me, I just couldn't place it. And I could not find the strength or the words inside of me to understand what I was feeling. So I hadn't even acknowledged to myself that I was actually grieving. And the moment I realized that, okay, what I'm feeling, had this sense of loss, shame, being misunderstood, being misheard, being feeling like I don't matter anymore, I don't have a place in this world anymore. And then someone actually pointed out to me, well, Karin, what you're feeling is grief. Yeah. And it wasn't until that moment that it just went click, 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 and it all just fell into place. And that's when I also started learning that, okay, so, and I in my line of work that I do, I'm a change management consultant, and I work with guiding people from A to B in the workplace. And I never realized that as an individual also, especially when you're grieving, there are so many parallels to actually the work I was doing, to my own story. And I never had linked them together, because for me, work is work. And my personal story is my personal story. Yeah. And so for me, at first it was really hard to deal with these comments. And like I said, then I got into my angry phase where I was just this raging bull. And I even, just a funny anecdote to share, Sarah. I was walking in a supermarket and I saw a couple of mums with kids in their trolleys doing the supermarket and chatting over, I don't know, the bread aisle, I don't know. And I just got so upset and so angry. And all I wanted to do was ram my shopping trolley into all of their trolleys and just kind of, destroy that whole idyllic scene that was in front of me. That happened in my head. What really happened in reality is I just left my full shopping trolley and I just walked out of the supermarket, and I just sat in the car park in my car, and I think I cried for an hour, hanging over my steering wheel, and just cried for an hour. And they hadn't even said anything to me, but it was just that picture that I was confronted with, and almost like the pitying looks, and it was just So, and as I've progressed through my grief journey, I'm now more witty, I'm now more sharp, and because I feel that I own my story more, I am also pretty comfortable with countering some of the comments, and we will talk about the countering in a minute in the webinar. But so I see the chat exploding, and thank you for your love and for your understanding to everybody who's commenting. Yes. And the moment you start owning your story, and the moment you actually start realizing that you're on a grief journey, that's when things also for yourself as a person who's going through this, things will start falling into place a bit more. And I can honestly say, whatever you're feeling right now, it won't last. It will get better, but the only way it will is if you are able or willing to do the work for it. Grief does require some work to help you move forward with it. It'll never go away completely, but you can. There are some things you can do.
Definitely. All right.
Sorry, that was me.
That's all right. So let's have a look at, we're going to really quickly talk about why it hurts so much. And I guess one of the things that really drove me into setting up the Empty Cradle and doing the academic work I'm doing is that, like I said, I was taken out by my grief experience. I couldn't work out why, first of all, it affected me so badly and why I was in such a state. And second of all, why it was invisible to all the people around me, even though I was kind of saying, hey, this is what's going on. And I was very alone. I didn't have other people that I could talk to about it. And so what I wanted to say to you is that what you're going through is really, really significant. It's actually a major life event. The way that, so as I started to kind of go through the academic literature and particularly looking at some of the work in sociology around our experience, is that ours is not just a major life event, but it's actually also that we haven't made the normative transition to parenthood. Instead, we've actually followed a non-normative path into permanent involuntary childlessness. What we were doing is we were, and when I was studying this stuff, is we looked at this work by a couple of sociologists, and they were looking at the impact of a major life event or a major life transition. And they had 6 key categories. And I went through it and went, oh my God, we tick all 6 of the negative ones. So it's a major event, it's unanticipated, it's uncontrollable, it's atypical, it's undesirable, and it's chronic in the sense that it's actually ongoing. It's not just a thing that happens, it actually continues. And so what that means for us is that we have this grief experience, and that's our transition pathway. And that's the way that we're able to move forward in terms of integrating or owning our life story. What that means for us is that in the background of what's going on for us in terms of the grief is that these comments get made, and what they become is they become emotional triggers or emotional reactions. So what comes out is our sense of grief. So it's all that range of grief emotions. And one of the things that I found was amazing is when I was reading about the grief that parents experience around the death of a child, it's actually very similar to the grief that we go through. So lots of the feelings around anger, jealousy, comparison, feeling excluded, a whole lot of those sort of emotions are very similar to our grieving journey. The second thing that can be triggered up for us is our sense of injustice and how unfair it is. And not just because we didn't have children, it's actually the injustice of being in a world that doesn't recognize, acknowledge, see and understand our experience. And then the third thing which I wanted to flag is that sometimes it can also trigger up traumatic memories and traumatic experience. So if there's been things like a traumatic miscarriage, those kinds of things where you're actually having an experience replaying in your mind, and that can be really important for you to go and actually get some therapeutic support around that, so that you can get some support through that process. One of the things that I talk about when, and I do have people who say to me, well, what do I say? What do I say to somebody? And I will say, what you need to do is look at having a benchmark for sensitivity. And what I say the benchmark for sensitivity is, think through what you're about to say and imagine you're about to say that to somebody whose child has died. And that is how it lands. So when you think about it, I'm just going through a process where my child has passed away, and you say to me, oh, you could just adopt. How insensitive is that?
Yeah.
That is why this is so insensitive, is basically we are going through a parallel, very similar grief process, and people are coming out with these ridiculous comments that are completely insensitive, basically. And so finally, which is this beautiful...
Yeah, Sarah, I just want to touch on that. I just want to touch on especially the last remark that you've just made. For me, that was also, I think I've actually used that a couple of times now as well, because someone mentioned earlier in the chat. Okay, so because when I mentioned that, the moment I saw it as that I was grieving, and someone mentioned, but what about the other person if they don't recognize this as grief? And for me, this is actually a beautiful example of how you can actually make the other person understand what you're going through. So that, and of course, there are always going to be people who say, but you didn't lose your child though, did you? And I was like, well, I'm trying to explain to you what I'm feeling, and how what the feeling, what I'm going through, how that compares. You know, I may not have lost a child physically, but I have lost my opportunity. I've lost my chance of motherhood, and I've lost my chance of ever being pregnant. I've lost my chance of ever nurturing a baby, of holding a baby, and all that kind of stuff, of bringing a child into this world. I've lost that opportunity. And when I explain that to people, that usually tends to shut them up and really make them think about, like, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, not everybody
Yeah.
I speak to, not everybody
Yeah.
will get it, because we will also touch upon that later. But some people are just incapable of understanding what
Absolutely.
grief in the broader
Yeah.
sense of the word is in any case.
And what I would say to that is also that there's a couple of things. One of them is that it's important, first of all, for you to see your grief and to hold the space for your grief, for you to then go, what is the supports I need? It might be that I need to see a grief counsellor. I suggested it's really important to contact other childless people. And the reason for that is that it's really important for us to be able to process our grief. We need social validation. So we actually need to be seen, to be held, to actually be normalised and say, yeah, this is actually very normal. And while you're still really vulnerable, is to be really, you don't have to justify that you're grieving. Like, you don't actually have to convince the other person that you're grieving. And it may be that, particularly if it's an ongoing relationship, it might actually be, you know, there may be down the track when I'm in a more solid place that I can get some information and explain this to you better. But the most important thing is the nurturing that you get when you're feeling really fragile and vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So the next thing I want to really quickly look at is just to really talk about where the comments are coming from. And some of these you'll be really familiar with already. And I just want to scoot through this fairly quickly because I want us to move fairly quickly into the practice and practice skills. So firstly, we live in quite a patriarchal society where women's social value can be based on their fertility, and also where men's value can be based on their fertility and also their ability to be the provider and to be able to earn a livelihood. And so childless older people tend to be devalued in our society. The second thing is that we're a very family-centered cultures, where parenting is the assumed norm, that childlessness is seen as a deviation, and where motherhood is equated to womanhood. So a lot of the comments we receive are driven by ignorance, where people just simply haven't got a clue. They're not curious about our experience. They haven't made any sort of effort to find out what our lives are like, what our experiences might be. So a lot of it is driven by ignorance, some of it by assumptions, a lot by fear. So when you think about it, sometimes the way to get there as a parent of not having a child is to think about your children and all the things that they bring to your world and all that they mean, and imagine their absence in your life. And for so many parents, it's too hard for them. So that's why they go into these defensive, reactive, often quite hostile comments, is because they just can't go there. So they have to shut us out and minimize our experiences. There might be value judgments, and certainly sometimes there can be malice. So there can actually be a real hostility towards us and a resentment about our experiences. So people lack a frame of reference around childlessness, and essentially they have no incentive to get a frame of reference. They have no reason necessarily to think about it.
Yeah, and Sarah, and just sorry to add to that is indeed they have no reference. And also quite often I find when people who are responding from that place is that they either have not dealt with they either have not been faced with a major loss in their life ever before, or they are just so emotionally unequipped to actually deal with them. So so basically they have not learned how to deal with emotions in the first place. So I just want to reiterate as well that it doesn't say anything about you as a person who's receiving the comment. It speaks volumes about the person who makes the comment. So also please do keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. And that allows us to put our experience within that broader context and go, this isn't about me. This is actually not my issue. And I want to give the example of when one of the things I did early in my career is I worked a lot with gay and lesbian young people. And what gay and lesbian young people that I worked with, which was quite a few decades ago, a lot of them grew up in quite either homophobic culture or homophobic families. And they internalized it. So what they did is they actually adopted, I'm bad, it's something wrong with me, that sort of thing. One of the most important things that we did when I was working with them was to actually identify what is homophobia and what's the culture that you've grown up in. And once they were able to say, oh my God, this isn't about me, this is actually about the culture that I'm living in, or the beliefs and values of the people around me, that was often a really important key to unlocking them being able to progress on their path to self-acceptance. And I guess that's really important for us because often we may have internalized a lot of those patriarchal and pronatalist messages as well, where we believe that the only valuable life is to be a mother. And that might have been true for us up to a point, but it's about gently expanding our own beliefs around that and being able to explore other options.
Yeah.
So let's keep moving. So what we wanted to do now is really start moving into, we've kind of set the scene around what the comments are, a little bit around the context in which the comments are made. So let's now start talking about what we can do in terms of a response.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave this with you, Karin.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, and thank you so much for your wise knowledge on the topic so far. And I just love how the chat is exploding. So I hope you get a chance to kind of scroll through the chat a little bit as I'm now speaking on the next slide. But it's just, there's so much love and so much understanding for this topic. So I just wanted to. Can
I just interrupt you for a second? I just want to let you know, I've worked with over 200 women. And I have not met a single childless woman that I just didn't think was amazing. Like every single woman I've met, I've just gone, oh my God, we are so incredible. Let me just say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yay us, to be honest with you. Yay us. Yay all of us. Right. So talking about the general principles. And so I just wanted to give you all a little bit of an understanding. And so please be aware that the pain that you feel, the pain is the pain, and it really is okay to set your boundaries, and especially when you are feeling that more vulnerable. And so sometimes it's perfectly okay to not be okay, basically, which is, by the way, a great book. Also, there is no perfect answer to when you get a comment. There is no perfect answer, so please don't feel that you have to formulate the perfect answer before you actually answer. So if you do answer just from your gut emotion and just blurt something out that you might regret afterwards, it's absolutely fine too, you know. And there is room to try out different things. Another principle is the shifting sands. So changes over time. So what I and both me and Sarah have learned in our grief journey, that you may feel different things on different days with different people, and that's perfectly normal. I've just explained earlier that I'm quite far advanced in my grief journey. I don't get so many triggers anymore, and I'm genuinely okay with being a childless woman. However, some days someone says something, and I may have been perfectly fine with the person in the past, and then just that one day the same person says something and I just see red. So it's okay to feel that kind of, it does go up and down like that, and it's perfectly fine. You can use them in your response over time as a marker of your personal grief journey. And the important question is, how are you now? And so what do you need now? And so basically do that kind of self-check-in when you are confronted with comments that you are not sure how to respond to, how to deal with. Just, allow yourself to kind of go, okay, what is it that I need right now in this moment, in this time, in this space? And if you need to walk away, that's also fine. If you need to kind of, be strong and in your response, it's all okay, but also please make sure that you put your own needs first. And then, sometimes you don't even have to explain yourself. Just know that it's okay to choose you at that moment in time. Another principle is that make sure how can or learn how you can be empowered in your responses. And that won't lessen the pain as such, but it may help you to build your confidence in navigating your social world. So how can I keep myself in check when I am at a birthday party or at, a family Christmas party, or, when you have siblings and you have your nieces and nephews run around and, you feel all you want to do is kind of hide in a corner behind the curtain, or, so just, experiment with it. And also what has really helped me is to also explain to my dearest and nearest, not to everybody, but to my dearest and nearest, that I'm trying to navigate my way through this. Will you please be patient with me?
Yeah.
And that already also took, especially for my sister, it took away the awkwardness that she felt towards me, because my sister is a mother of 2. I'm a very proud aunt. I love my niece and my nephew, and but my sister did, yes, especially when I've just pretty early on after my when my childless years started, she felt really uncomfortable with sharing her stories from as a mother with me. But I said, well, I'm still your sister. I'm still an aunt to your children, but just have some patience with me as I navigate my way through this grief landscape. And that for her kind of took away the awkwardness, so that really helped as well. So feel free to navigate there. And then also empowering curiosity. I wonder why this hurts so much. I wonder what I need. I wonder why are they saying that? Or and then also I wonder what response would be the most effective. So I always say count 5 Mississippis, and that's an expression I use quite often, is that it's okay to be silent for a while, and it's okay to take your time when formulating a response. And for me, what really helps is the 5 Mississippi rule. So literally just go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and so on until you get the 5 Mississippis, because that sometimes really gives you that extra time to formulate the response that you actually want to say or should say, and that sometimes really helps. Another one, as Sarah
and
mentioned,
interesting that the curious,
sorry,
when you engage the curious part of the brain, it's actually got a self-soothing, it uses a self-soothing within your brain as well. So when you're in that really anxious space, and the curiosity afterwards as well, where you're going, I wonder what was going on there. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But thank you for bringing that in, Sarah. Really, really good addition. Another principle is, find your tribe. There's 80 of us in the call today. And I don't know how many people will be watching it afterwards on the recording. But find your tribe, find that network, find that community of other childless people. The Empty Cradle is a good example. Gateway Women is a good example. There's plenty of Facebook pages going around. So find that tribe, because social validation is an integral part of your healing journey. And not all childless or even child-free people are supportive. Not all parents are supportive. Not all siblings or not all friends are supportive. We are needing reciprocity in our relationships. So we need to be validated in our relationships. And it wasn't until I found, for me, it's Gateway Women, but I have other networks as well. But it wasn't until I found my tribe where I literally felt as if I stepped into that warm bath where I actually only had to say 1 word or 2 words, and people just understood. And there was no judgment. There was no unsolicited advice. There was no tips or tricks. It was just being heard, being acknowledged. So that was brilliant.
And that reciprocity is really important in relationships, where I can hold the space for you and you hold the space for me. And I can say that one of the most consistent supportive relationships in my life has been one of my dear friends who's a mother of 3 children. And during the really dark part of my grief, we would talk a couple of times a week, and she knew what was going on for me. And because she saw my pain and held the space for it and validated it, I actually was okay then to hear about her children and hear about where she was struggling, where it was tough for her. But it was actually because my grief was seen. That was the key to it. And it's not that complicated either to be able to hold that space. It's not fixing it. It's not giving advice. It's just, that must be really hard. And we'll talk a bit more about that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's a lovely connection to the last one here on the slide. Is that just we're aiming for small changes. So that's just that one conversation at a time. And Sarah, your example of your friend who is a mum of 3. I have an example of one of my best friends is a mother of 4, but she has actually been my biggest cheerleader in my childless journey. She supports me in everything I do, and there's always room for me and my story at her table.
Yeah.
And even when she sees that I'm struggling, she gets it, and there's room for me, complete all of me. And so and I wish that I wish for everybody to have that 1 or 2 persons in their lives, and if you don't
I
have
was
them in
going
your
to say, it doesn't have to be a lot of people, does it? It's 1 or 2.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you don't have such a person in your life right now, please reach out to the networks that are available.
Yes.
On the web, on World Childless Week website, there's a plethora of groups and networks and stuff that Steph has gathered over the years. And so please have a look in there as well, because and for me also the friendships that have been born from those networks are incredibly. And so take those small steps, take those one conversations at a time.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so that also for me, that's the last thing I want to say about this slide, is that that once we start doing that, we can actually all start working together collectively for that cultural change.
Absolutely.
And especially once you're
And that's
feeling,
so important.
yeah, and especially once you're feeling a little bit less vulnerable, when you're kind of finding your feet in this whole new landscape that you've been thrown into. Well, once you find your feet again a little bit, and once you've crawled up from the floor, I was literally on the floor in the depths of my grief. I cried for hours and hours and days on end. But when I actually kind of slowly got up again and found my feet again, it's those little, literally step by step, those little kind of small steps to take to move forwards. And it's brilliant.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I
Let's
just
get
want to
into some
answer
of
a
these.
question. Sorry, Sarah. Just answer one question from the chat. Yes, the slides will be shared with you after this webinar, and the slides will be posted on the website of World Childless Week. So the recording and the slides will all be available to you afterwards. So I just wanted to put that in there.
And just clarifying, we're going for an hour and a half for this one. So we've got another 30
we still have half an hour left on the webinar. So please stay with us if you can.
Excellent. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of somebody has just said something really offensive to you, and walk us through, Karin, what you're suggesting we might do in that immediate moment.
Yeah. Okay, so in the immediate moment, so what happens when the comment is made? So please be aware, and this is just a lovely little checklist that you can even, I would even maybe write it down, or just make a screen copy of this. Again, like I said, the slides will be shared, but so please be aware that what can happen to you as an individual when you get those comments. So you can have emotional triggers your grief can be triggered, even old trauma can be triggered. Might feel judged, or you might feel harm done by, and so be aware of that, and be mindful of your fast and your slow brain. And for those of you who are not familiar with the works of Kahneman, is that your fast and your slow brain, within everybody's brain, we have what's called the limbic system, and that's where our reptile brain, so basically our oldest brain resides, where our primal instinctive reactions come from. Next to that kind of reptile brain, we have our mammal brain, so that's where our decision making takes place. That's where our memory is stored, and then we have our neocortex, so our new brain, as we call it, our new brain, and that's where we kind of just act from once we thought about it. So it's almost like our reptile brain gives us the reaction, then the mammal brain kind of processes it, and then our neocortex, that's where the action comes from. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, there's more to it, but in a nutshell, how that works. And so be mindful. And again, I think this is here where the counting your 5 Mississippis can really help, so that you don't respond from that kind of old dinosaur brain that resides inside of you, where you go bleh, but that you actually take your time to think about, how can I formulate my response in the best possible way? There's lots of research on it, so if you want to find out more about it, just Google the name of Kahneman and slow brain, fast brain. There's lots of interesting stuff around it. And also linked to that is take the time you need, and not only count your Mississippis, but also take the time you need to process during when it happens, even before you're at a social gathering. Kind of mentally prepare yourself, ground yourself, and kind of kind of protect yourself before you put yourself into a situation, and also just afterwards as well. So if you have been confronted with such comments, or if you have been confronted at a social gathering or at work or wherever you are, allow yourself also the time afterwards to sit with it and to process it. Reach out to your network, reach out to that friend of yours who understands, kind of those kind of things. Tend to your emotional response first. So what do you need first? So take a breath, be kind to yourself. Even what I very often do is I have like a self-compassion mantra, and that where I just go, okay, this is a moment of suffering. This shall pass. And there are loads of mantras out there that you can use, but that's what I really just, okay, before I even formulate my response, I always acknowledge myself first. And of course, I know that this sounds textbook, because it doesn't always work with me either. I am such a spontaneous person that I just go bleh, and then I'm like, oh crap, I should have thought of that first. So don't worry if if you don't stick to this list. I'm even after practicing this for so many years, I still blurt stuff out, because sometimes it really is just. Sometimes it just requires that reaction, doesn't it, Sarah? Where you just go, ah! And sometimes it just feels really good to actually let it out.
And look, just do and say what you need to in that moment. And, that's...
Yeah, absolutely. And also know that whatever you say, it's okay. And I've just seen Michael's comment, someone's comment in the chat. Says, I'd like to endorse tasering these people. Oh, maybe we shouldn't endorse that as such, but just
it's understandable.
Visualize it mentally, but please don't act on that. I don't condone any violence towards others, but sometimes that is also what would be the best way. But anyway, what you could do after the comment is made is what I kind of already touched upon this. So be kind to yourself, have some self-compassion, tend to your grief, debrief with your tribe, get some support, and reflect and expand on the range of response options. So you can actually practice with this, and also maybe even find someone within that tribe and just go, you know what, can we just have like a practice session on how we can respond? What would be the best way to respond? And sometimes also when this happens in the workplace, you may, depending on the severity, well, actually maybe not depending on, no, forget I said that. When this happens in the workplace, what you might want to do is to look at your HR policies, maybe have a chat with your HR manager if that person exists in your workplace. Actually, earlier this week, I did a webinar together with Liz Bishop and Les Fenmore from the Bristol University, who have actually created a HR policy around childlessness. It's brilliant. It's so incredible. And actually there are some really good examples on how to reach out to your HR department in that webinar. So if you haven't watched it, please, I would recommend you watch it on the record. It's listed again on the website, and there's some really good tips in there actually also on how to approach your employer on this topic. And so those are some of the things that you could do. And so I really hope that this this helps you.
And you have a right to an emotionally safe workplace. It's and what I would suggest is that it's not about you going personally saying, hey, I need protection in the workplace. It might actually be, hey, there are people in this workplace who are going through these experiences. We need to actually address this in terms of being an inclusive workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also just want to acknowledge a lovely comment from a lovely lady who I haven't seen for a long time. It's good to have you. Good to have you here. That also that if you want to be seen and heard, sometimes it's no harm to react rather than reflect. That's exactly what but that's exactly what I said earlier as well. As sometimes you really just need to kind of go bleh, just to make the other person kind of understand what it is that they're doing.
Exactly right.
Even though,
Yeah.
it's good to reflect, yes, because in certain situations, you might actually do yourself more harm if you do blurt stuff out. But on other occasions, it is actually the best thing to do is just to go put someone back in their place and just go, literally F it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And to have a whole set, and we're going to actually talk our way through that, because this is the stuff we've talked about here is just about, when you're feeling really overwhelmed with your emotions, and looking at the range of options that you've got. And one of them is absolutely just to tell someone to F off, like none of their business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Sarah, I'm just looked at the time. We're 12 minutes past the hour, so we've got 18 minutes left. So I just wanted to make us both aware of that.
Excellent. So what we're going to look at now is we're actually going to look at a bit of a tool that that we use a little bit in the Empty Cradle with women, and this is a tool that can help partly in preparation and also in reflecting afterwards and thinking through what was that experience, what are the range of different ways I might be able to respond. So in terms of thinking the response is yours, this is about how do you step into a more empowered response where you get to say really clearly exactly what needs to be said, which might be really hard and direct comments about how inappropriate a comment is. And that's totally fine. So in terms of the response is yours, there's 5 key areas. The first is around you. So where are you at? What's going on for you? Where are you at in your grief journey? What are the emotions that are on the table for you? And what is it that you need to say and that needs to be heard? The second is the other person. So who is the other person? Is it a social acquaintance? Is it a family member or a friend? Is it in a workplace or strangers? Like who is it that's actually making that comment? Next, to think through the context. So the context is not just that broader social context that we talked about, but also is it a workplace? Is it somebody where it's social small talk and they're just fishing around for, social conversational topics, to get a feel for what's actually happening in the immediate context. Then looking at the relationship and to get a feel for how invested are you in this relationship? What would be your goal of what you're wanting to achieve in terms of your response to that person? And what is the ongoing nature of that relationship? And then finally, which is the S, which is looking at the skills. So what are the strategies or skills that you might be able to use in terms of responding to the comments that are said? So we suggest with this framework that, which is why we talked about the immediate response is you just say what you need to say. And if it's, if someone said something consistently inappropriately, it's fine for you to just go absolutely back off. You have no right to talk to me about this. This is a bit of a planning tool, and it's probably particularly related to relationships that might be a little bit more ongoing or ones that you are a little bit more invested in. And it's a tool that you can use beforehand to think through a range of response options, but also as a reflective tool afterwards. So if you've had an interaction and it's a little bit driven by being curious in your inquiry, kind of going, what happened there? What was that about? So we suggest starting with the comment. So what was it that was said or done? And then to have a look at what type of comment was it? Was it a problem-solving one? Was it a minimizing my grief? Was it trying to minimize the importance of motherhood? It gives you a chance to think through what was actually potentially driving this comment, and then to think through, and you could actually directly ask the person about this, or else you could try and actually work through and go, what do you think might have been driving that comment? What do you think might have sat behind that comment? And this can be a little bit of a brainstorm where you go through and you think through some possible options of what might have been happening. And it could be pure ignorance, it could be hostility, it could be fear, it could be a whole range of different responses. The important thing that I want to emphasize here is that this is not about you having to wander around and try and understand what's happening in a very prenatalist world. This is actually more about you going, I'm trying to work out how my response can be effective and how I can fit that to what might have been happening for that person. So for example, someone might have come out and said something really inappropriate. And then when you dig into trying to work out why they've said it, it's actually that they're ignorant and they may be quite open to hearing and listening to your story and finding out about what your experience has been. And then when you're able to be quite specific about what you need, there actually can sometimes be some room for that person to shift and be open to engaging with you in quite a different kind of way. Certainly some of the people close in my social world who have been supportive have actually been on a bit of a journey like that with me, where they had no idea. They didn't know anybody who was childless, and they were actually open to finding out about that experience as we traveled together with it. So then it's then going through those 5 key areas. So how were you feeling before and after and during the experience? What was it that you needed at that point in time? Who was the other person? A little bit about the context. Then having a look at the relationship. And seriously, you know, if it's a person that you have minimal investment in, you know, those F-off comments can be quite appropriate in terms of, get out of my face. I'm not actually going to be you know, talking to you about this. This is a really private matter. Then it's looking at a range of skills and strategies and possible response options, and fitting and having a chance to practice what your response options are going to be. Okay, so what I think we might do is we might, given that we're short on time, we might flip through to looking at those range of different response options.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think might be really helpful, and then we'll bring it to a bit of a close.
Yeah, and once again, for those who are watching, who are attending this webinar, the slides will be shared with you. So please don't panic that we are now skipping through some slides. The content, we're still going to talk about it. But we just want to move on, and also because I've just looked at some of the questions that have come up in the Q&A as well, and I hope that by going into this into these slides a bit more in detail as opposed to the previous ones, we will also answer some of those questions. And like I said, we only have 12 minutes left, so don't worry, all the slides will be shared with you.
So the response options. So this is the range of responses, and you'll probably have quite a few more in addition to this. So these were some ones that we worked with that we thought might be really helpful to be mindful of. So the first one is that you could leave the conversation or the space, which is, sorry, I've got to take a phone call, or you can walk away from that conversation. You don't have to engage. To change the topic, to give a simple no, and that's it. That's the end. You don't have to explain. To make some sort of a sarcastic or witty joke. I've got a few examples of those. I remember one the other night where, which I actually hadn't previously done, where a family member said something about that the traffic was increased because everybody was on school holidays. And I looked at my partner and said, oh my God, we forgot to pick the kids up from school. And it was just a way of basically, and this is like 15 years down the track in my journey, but it was a way of actually just kind of saying, like, I guess, about some level of visibility around, that wasn't something that we were comfortable with, I guess. Giving a simple and a clear response, which can be kind of an assertive kind of response. To be honest, particularly about the emotional impact of a response, and particularly in a relationship, that is quite important. So if someone said something, to be able to actually say, actually, that's really touched on a really tender point, which might then, could be then an invitation into a deeper conversation, which might be someone, if it's somebody that you feel invested in, to actually say, if you'd like to have an honest conversation about that, or if you'd like to talk about my experience of that, is that something that you would be comfortable with? And so doing some sort of a deeper conversation. Sometimes it can be a teachable moment, which can be someone said something quite ignorant and you've got an opportunity to kind of educate or inform them. What I would suggest with that is to think through, what are the key messages that you'd like to convey if you were going to be teaching. And the two things that I often find quite helpful is, first of all, that it wasn't by choice, and second of all, that it hasn't been easy, and that you actually don't need to go into any more detail than that. You don't actually have to say all the ins and outs of what you've been through. And sometimes also, particularly when you're feeling in a really strong place, it can just be, you can just choose not to respond. You just, I'm not even going to engage. I'm just not even going to respond to that. So finally, in terms of the session now is that we're just going to walk you through very quickly through the additional material that's in there. So there's some additional suggestions and strategies that we've included in relation to the conversations that do matter with the people in your life that do matter. So just to be really mindful about the amount of energy we put into trying to win over people who actually don't really matter that much in our lives.
Yeah.
And looking at things like the invitation to a deeper conversation and thinking about how you might be able to frame those conversations.
Yeah, and especially, Sarah, if I may add, you know, because it's one of the questions is, okay, is how can you make sure that the conversation doesn't stop when someone asks you, do you have kids? And when you answer no, quite often that is a conversation stopper, full stop. That people just either, you know, look at you funny, or just kind of let that awkward silence that kind of fills the space. And I think when someone asks you that question, I really think that it's really important at that moment in time that you think about, indeed, so what is my relationship to this person? What do I want to get out of the relationship with this person? Do I need to pursue this any further? Because then you can either change the examples you just given, change the topic, or what I've sometimes done is like, that's interesting that you asked that question. You know, why is that so interesting for you to know about me? And then someone just goes, they kind of start stuttering, or like, and then they realize that they've asked a very personal question, because at the end of the day, it is a very personal question, but because it's so ingrained in our patriarchal pronatalist society to actually, you know, to ask such a personal question to anybody. But then, and for me, I do have a real good joker card that I can play. It just goes, no, I don't have a womb. So, you know, want to talk about the weather? You know, so that's kind of like a witty, sarcastic remark. But I have also in the past said, no, unfortunately, I couldn't have them. And then depending on, again, what relationship I want to have with that person, they either pursue the conversation, or I just, you know, on a good day, I just like, no, unfortunately, I couldn't have them. What about you? You know, so I just turn it straight around to the other person, depending, again.
Yeah. And it's completely subjective in terms, and what we're trying to do today is basically just look at broadening up the range of response options, and then for you to be able to go, okay, I'm going to look at the context, the person, how am I feeling, and I'm going to do a bit of fitting between those different parts of the context. Yeah. So that might bring us through to questions.
Oh my goodness, is it that time already? I can't believe it, Sarah. An hour and a half has just flown by. It's brilliant. And I just, and it's just so lovely also to see the chat. And I just want to open the Q&A. And I think the first one we've just answered, that is, do you have children? A simple no seems like such a conversation stopper. I hope we've kind of covered that. And another question that's in the Q&A box is, what do I do at a family event when all women are talking kids in the kitchen and the blokes are out drinking beers at the barbecue? My go-to place is actually stand with the men, talk about you know, beer and barbecue, but that's me, because I've never liked being in like this kind of women's clique. The moment I hear that they're talking about children, I just kind of like, no. So and I like beer, so I'll go and have a beer. However, I have also had moments where I then walk back into the kitchen with the beer in my hand, and sometimes even a burger or a sausage just fresh from the barbecue, and it's like, so what else has been happening in your life, ladies? Anything else to talk about but kids? You know, anything else you want to share that's interesting about your life? And of course, again, that can be a little bit sarcastic or sometimes a bit witty, or sometimes I just look up a friend and just, you know, interact with that person and just, you know, have a side conversation. It's like, hey, you know, how are you? And, you know, what's been happening? You know, how's work? Because quite often, women who are mothers, what I have also learned is that they sometimes really appreciate also the fact that it's not always about the children. So it does work both ways as well. Yeah. And
the other thing that I would say to that is that I had quite a few years where it was really hard for me. Like, for example, Mother's Day, I would have a week before where I was really emotional coming into that week. Mother's Day was really, really hard. I would have a week of recovery. It would basically knock me out for 2 weeks. Similar to Christmas, I often would have a 6-week lead-in time around Christmas where it would be really, my grief would, you know, be so visible. And I guess one of the things I'd really suggest during that time is that it's actually okay for you to set really clear boundaries, to actually go, well, I've heard of women who do things like they're away during Christmas, so they're actually not available during the really tough, griefy years, not available to attend family Christmas. It might be that you limit your contact, so you're going for an hour or a short period of time, to find if there's any allies in that context who understand what's going on for you and who understand that while you're going through the really pointy end of the grief, this is what you need to do to actually care for yourself during this time.
Yeah.
Any other strategies that you've found helpful, Karin? Like those
well,
sorts of things?
no, especially the Christmas one. For a long time, my husband and I we booked ourselves a holiday, but of course, the Christmas time is really expensive to go abroad to the sunshine or whatever. But we have actually now turned around that we celebrate Christmas at our house on our terms. So we decide who comes over and we decide who we invite. And so we've kind of taken control of that for ourselves. So that's been really helpful. And and I've also stopped apologizing for the fact why I'm not at a family event. I've honestly stopped apologizing for it. I make a deliberate choice whether I want to go to a certain family or friend event, and if I don't attend, I just say I'm sorry, we can't make it, and leave it at that. And I don't feel guilty about it anymore as well. So and there's one question that I still would like to bring in. There's one question left in the Q&A box, and then we've covered those as well. Is that someone writes, maybe you could have an answer at this, a go at this, answering this, Sarah. My childlessness didn't happen at one particular moment. It feels very complicated to give a quick answer. How could I respond?
Do you mean in one particular moment? It feels very complicated to give a quick answer.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a really good answer.
Yeah.
Is to say it wasn't a particular moment. It was this, this ongoing process,
complicated
in my
journey.
life.
Yeah.
And I completely agree in terms of giving a quick pat answer. And that's why with the tool is to really think through, so who's the person that I'm actually saying this to?
Yeah.
What is it that I'm hoping to achieve? Like, am I trying to at least, do I want them to be informed about where I'm at and what my journey has been? Is this somebody who is potentially going to be supportive around this? It's actually okay for you to give as little or as much information as you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm saying, one of the things that's really important is to get your own supports, and particularly to maybe go and get grief and loss counselling to try and actually really get to a solid place, so that you're in a much more solid place to be able to have some of these really hard conversations. Like, one of the things in my experience, for example, is it sometimes took me quite a few years to tell particular people who were close in some of my networks, because I wasn't in a strong enough place to really be okay if they were not going to react well to my childlessness. There's certain people in my circle who I just don't talk to about that topic at all. And it's that I know that they're not safe people for me to actually go into the conversation with. I guess that would be starting to touch on it, in terms of a response. Yeah, no,
absolutely. And it's and I love how you also said that in itself, the journey in itself is already a brilliant answer. So thank you for your questions, everybody, and thank you for being here with us. We have some final words. Some final words up on the screen here, and I'll read them out.
And I just quickly wanted to say as well that pronatalism and pronatalist assumption and very family orientated people, that can be such a brutal space and brutal world for us to be in, and it's so important for us to recognize that for each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sorry,
and no, that's a lovely introduction to actually what I want to say, is that the failure of society to see us to support us and embrace us. It's not our shame. It's not our shame. It's theirs. I think they should read.
It's theirs.
Yeah, it's theirs. It's not yours. It's theirs. We will change this before we send it out. As we come together to tell our stories, raise our voices, and work together for change, we are no longer silenced by shame. We claim our place in the town square with dignity and pride. And with that, we just want to say a big thank you to all of us, for all of you who attended the webinar today with me and Sarah. And thank you, Steph, for letting us, for giving us the floor today here with in this wonderful initiative that's called World Childless Week. If you guys want to know more about me or Sarah, if you want to reach out, here are our contact details. And yeah, again, thank you so much for being here with us, for being so actively participating in the chat as well. And for those of you who watched live on Facebook, oh my God, that idea just kind of dawned on me. Anyway, thank you all for watching. And if you're watching this on the record, I really hope you enjoyed it a lot. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to be with all of you today. Again, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun preparing this with you, and thank you for your incredible wisdom and your wise words. You're a beautiful woman. We all are beautiful women and men. We are all beautiful people. I wish you all the best, and I hope to see you in one of the networks soon. And lots of love from me. I always close with lots of love to everybody. And
absolutely.
Thank you
and
for,
wishing you all the very, very
here.
best, because we know this journey from the inside out. We know how tough it can be, and we're just so with you, and we've got your backs. We've got each other's backs.
Absolutely.
It's so important.
Well, thank you both so much for what's been a really interesting webinar. The chat has gone crazy, has gone busy, and what's lovely is the fact that people are sharing what's hurt them, but they're also sharing love and laughter in there. And I think that's what our community is about, is the whole cycle from the deepest of grief to the support of others. And what you've covered, I think, with how you react to something in the moment, it's always going to be right. Don't regret what you've said. Maybe learn from what you've said if you don't like it afterwards, but don't regret it, because your emotions dictate and the surroundings and the location and what you did the minute before sometimes. You know, as you say, you've covered it all and said we can't always predict how we're going to react. Sometimes we can take that breath, sometimes we can't, but we can't live regretting what we've said to people as a reaction that is completely natural and that's come out of us. Whether it's through what we say or how we act physically with tensing up and stuff, we just have to accept that as part of who we were at that moment in time and embrace it and learn from it for ourselves, not for anybody else, just for ourselves to be comfortable in our own body, in our space. So thank you for everything you said.
Totally.
You know, and again, I think we could carry on for longer quite easily because it's such an in-depth discussion, but
it's a huge discussion. It's huge. And it's so brutal. And like I said, I have not met a childless person that I haven't loved. I just think we are just such an awesome group of people, and bless us. And coming together and seeing each other and holding the space for each other is just so powerful. So yeah, do reach out.
Please do. And again, lots of love to you all, and thanks again, Steph, for organizing this amazing week for all of us. You really are my true North Star. You are such an inspiration to me.
You are amazing. Thank you, Steph.
We're all special in our own unique way. Don't do that. You'll start me crying. You know, I'll cry for ages. But on that note, I think with all that love we've just given, I'm going to press the stop recording very shortly and just say again, thank you to everybody, and that includes all of you in the chat as well. You've all supported each other. It's been wonderful, and we will get this recording and all the sheets and all the links that we possibly can up on the website as soon as possible for you. So until the next webinar, so it's good morning, good evening, good night. We're across the world. We love you, and we leave you for now. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.